Urban explorers, what is the creepiest we're not alone experiences you've had? So there's a moderately well-known abandoned mental hospital close to my town. A few months back a few friends and I went to explore a bit. Not a rare thing for people here. We found this setup of a few folding chairs and a couple of old mattresses with blankets and whatever else you'd imagine on them. We chilled there for about 10 minutes and then went on with our adventure upwards. Pretty uneventful from then on. A few really cool graffiti murals, awesome view from the roof. When we were coming back down we passed through the room and all the chairs were folded up and neatly stacked against the wall and the beds were made. Or at least as close to that as it could have been. Whoever did it would have most likely known that we were there and waited for us to leave to do all of it, as it was only a time frame of about 45 minutes. No threats or anything, just an eerie feeling of being watching in an abandoned mental hospital. I was at an abandoned medical school in a pretty bad city with my friend. My friend told me homeless people squat there but only on the first floor. She even said one of her friends sat their backpack down and had it stolen by one of them in plain sight, so we avoided it and explored the second floor. We kept hearing random noises like someone loosely following us, so we kept on guard but never saw anything. We were then in this room and heard a louder noise and look over to see a cat just chilling. It was the cat following us all along, cause after stopping to pet it and moving on, it continued following us making the noises we kept hearing. It eventually came right up to us to be pet. We assumed it was a stray and wanted to get it help, so we agreed that if it followed us out we'll take it somewhere or to someone who will care for it. It followed us outside then immediately ran from us when we were like lol velp, guess we got a cat now, so I went to see where it went. Only to see one of the doors to the bando open and this like 6 feet plus dude walk out and yell at me, "Y'all with my cat?" I just about shit myself thinking I was about to get murdered or something, haha. I was like, "Oh, is that your cat?" He followed us out. He's like, "Yeah, it's my cat, Colonel Mustard. Get over here." And the cat comes running to him. He introduced himself and we talked for a bit. He was actually a really cool guy, said he lives there and studies psychology and stuff to keep occupied. Bonus, picture of Colonel Mustard. So there's this building in my city that has been abandoned for over a decade. The building itself covers over 40 acres, so it's pretty well known by explorers that if the cops come they won't search for you inside but wait for you to come out. The second time I went to explore this building we were looking for a way inside. Keep in mind this is taking place early in the morning, maybe 3 a.m. We come across this section of the building that was a large outdoor amphitheater. We walked down to the center and went up to the boarded up windows, and ever so faintly on the other side of the wood you could hear someone talking to themselves. We got out of there. The third time I went we actually got in, also around 2 a.m. or so. We found one of the bearded up windows where the wood looked like it wasn't fully secured, so we pushed it back and there must have been some bricks piled up against it because there was a crash when we pushed it open so we could get inside, and right when that happened we heard someone running away from probably right behind there. Yet we still ventured in. We found a room in the basement that had blood all over the floor on that same trip. We thought we were in the beginning of a scary movie at one point because we didn't realize we had got to a level where it was blocked off a certain way to where we were walking in circles. So we kept taking different turns and ending up at the same place. Fun times in high school, man. I explored part of an old Nike or Atlas missile site one night with a few friends. As we were leaving, someone started shining a laser pointer at us from the woods. Somehow, we couldn't actually see where they were, even though that's usually pretty easy to do with laser pointers. I still wonder if it was just a laser pointer and not a laser sight instead. The area I'm currently in is a touristy beach place, so being winter it's completely devoid of life. There's a lot of apartments/hotels around that are just shells, no windows or doors. At 2 a.m. I went to go to the local garage to grab some smokes as we were running low. It's dead quiet and you can hear the tiniest sounds. I was walking past one such building when I felt like I was being watched. I looked up and around, but I couldn't hear or see anything, so I carried on walking but slower now, trying to be as quiet as possible while listening for anything strange. Suddenly every single dog around just went crazy barking, like dead silence to deafening barking in a second. Made me jump 10 feet. Looked up and on the third floor of an apartment that got no windows or doors put in yet is a single dog just staring at me. I literally turned around and walked straight back home and figured that I'd just go at a more reasonable time. I lived in China for the last 18 years. At night I would get bored and go out riding on my scooter and just explore various roads. This incident was about 14 years ago. There was a place I had been to in the daytime, down a country road that was mostly green hills and forest. Somewhere there was a little settlement where they were building a whole bunch of new things, including an apartment building that was at least 20 stories high. It was just a shell, no windows or doors or fittings yet, or even stairs, just the concrete for each of the floors and some of the walls. That night I rode past. And stopped. There were bamboo ladders leading up to the first few floors, and more bamboo ladders inside going all the way up the building. The entire building was filled with people. And they were families too. Mom, Dad, cooking pots, they had little fires going and were cooking, children and even babies. There were hundreds of people living there, and as I stopped there with the engine running, more and more heads started appearing, people watching me. They were all silent, nobody called out. They just looked, so I rode off again. And felt spooked. My friends and I were exploring an abandoned restaurant in this beach town one winter night. We snuck in through a broken window on the shore side, to avoid being spotted by any cars driving by. Overall, inside it was your typical abandoned restaurant, but was still really cool to check out. There was a long bar, tables tossed about, etc. We walked downstairs into a wine cellar, and started walking through the labyrinth of hallways. The basement was deceptively larger than we would have expected for a beachside restaurant. Anyway, we wander into this room off one of the hallways, and shine our flashlight in the corner, and we see an unmade bed, cot, with all of the trappings of someone currently living there, a safety razor next to the mirror, random other belongings. Our stomachs immediately dropped as we realized we were currently in someone's living quarters, and promptly noped out of there. To this day we still don't know if the person was hiding in the basement with us, waiting for us to leave. Of if we stumbled on it while they were out and about. Either way, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by someone from the shadows of that basement. So I take a lot of time lapses of nature and stuff. One clear night I decided to drive out to the middle of nowhere to get a time lapse of the stars. I found a lake that seemed like a cool spot to shoot and set up. About 20 minutes in I hear a noise and look up to see a light above me. Sure enough, a drone is right above me just hovering. It freaked me out, so I booked it out of there. I later learned I was trespassing on government property. I live in a big US West Coast city. In a neighborhood where most homes go right up to the sidewalk property line and have a yard and back. My place is the opposite, house is at the back of the lot, front yard keeps me buffered from street noise. It's a nice, dark little oasis in the city. My house has a double door / split door, so the top can open independently of the bottom. I often leave the top open when the weather's nice. I'm sitting on the couch in the living room, all of 15 feet from the door. It's nighttime, I'm reading, and the door's more or less directly in front of me. The porch light's off, yard's dark, the only light's from the dimmed reading lamp I'm using. The wind keeps blowing the top part of the door open, closed, open, closed. I'm used to it, happens all the time, doesn't sound out of place, until the door kind of misses a beat. I don't hear it thud closed. I look up, and it's perfectly still, only open 2 or 3 inches. It's one of those WTF are my eyes seeing moments. There's like a 15-mile-per-hour wind outside. How is the top part of the door partially open and perfectly still? Then my eyes or brain recognizes it, the outline of a hoodie, drawstrings, hood up. In that instant I am frozen and my heart is pounding. Someone is literally standing right there, hood up, holding my door open. I can't see his face, but he sees me, noticing because he says, "You should keep your doors locked." What? Now my adrenaline kicks in. I jump up shouting, he bolts. I get the porch light on in time to see him running out the gate. I still wonder how long he'd been standing there or WTF he was doing / thinking. The door has been very locked since then. I spent 2004 to 2009 living in a dilapidated warehouse that had a space over it converted into an apartment. In exploring the warehouse beneath it before moving in, a buddy of mine and I were discussing how the place smelled and was haunted. In making jokes about it, we started laughing when something shattered on the wall near us. We were seriously startled and contemplating what it could have been when someone shouts, "Shut up!" And there's a homeless man throwing what I assume is a second bottle at us from across the space. In a non-threatening way, I calmly state, "Are you sure you should be in here?" He waves something at me and yells at me to call the police if I don't like it. We had finally worked up the courage to explore this super scary looking dilapidated house. It was boarded up really solid, Nobody was getting in and out without a ton of work prying off boards. We searched exhaustively. The easier way in was to just make the damaged drywall on the back wall a little more damaged to widen the hole. As soon as we stepped in, there was something vaguely human-shaped at the top of the stairs we both saw. We bolted in terror. Of course, me and my friend were only 9 at the time. Was probably just some homeless dude better at finding entrances than us. As an adult now, I really want to go urban exploring in the NYC subway's abandoned stations. But I need to meet someone familiar with all the new post-9/11 security shit because I'm paranoid about it. An even more exciting target is the abandoned 19th SD Path station. The only even semi-modern footage is just blurs captured from passing trains, not any better than I can catch myself, but I think their security is tough. There's keypads at the tunnel entrances, presumably to disengage some security thing. There's an old flour mill on Harbor Island in Seattle. It's been abandoned and locked up for a while. My buddies went through a pretty serious Urban X phase near the end of high school, so we were going to all sorts of weird and interesting places in the area just checking it out. Got chased out by cops a few times, usual stuff. Anyway, inside this flour mill we're working our through some of the regular block areas, and our buddy swears he heard something. We all stopped dead in our tracks, lights pointed down, just listening. The amount of noise a dilapidated building makes when you're trying to be quiet is amazing, constant creaking and wind noises. Then I start to hear it. It was shuffling, with the sound of somebody dragging something across concrete. At this point I can feel my heart jumping out of my chest, the blood pulsing in my ears and head. I'm hyper aware as I try and pinpoint this sound and associate it with something I knew. By the time we're sure it's not just the wind, we've all heard the noises. There was 5 of us in there, and we're starting to think it's coming from near the stairs. We slowly, achingly, creep our way over broken glass and dirt. When we came up on the stairwell, we shined our lights down and up to the adjacent landings for the floor we were on and couldn't see anything. My buddy turns around, steps on an old water bottle on the ground, making the loudest crackling a water bottle has ever made in the history of recyclables. One of my other friends, looking back down the factory area we came through, gets startled and yells FCK at the sound of the water bottle. We immediately heard the most chilling, deep scream. At that instant we all just put the gas on and ran out. At the bottom of the stairwells we ran into 10 homeless people who weren't there before, but we paid them no mind and didn't stop our dead sprint until we got back to our cars. We figured it must have been some homeless person we scared with our creeping around and then sudden expletive. But we never saw the person or identified the sound, so who knows. I was on the other end of this. There was an abandoned nunnery on the coast behind a suburban development, a very creepy but beautiful place. I loved it because it had an entirely stone chapel. Any sound you made inside it true reverb and echo a second long almost. I brought a friend in to make some recordings in the dead of night. As we're leaving, a group of laughing neighborhood kids came in on us crouched in the dark over a bunch of electronics. They ran faster than I've seen anyone run before. A friend and we were going to explore a supposedly haunted slaughterhouse, which in fact is actually an old grain processing plant. It's about a mile walking along a paved road. It was nighttime but the moon was bright enough for us to see without needing lights. We could see 2 cell phone lights of people leaving the spot, walking towards us on the road. Friend and I didn't think much of it and kept walking down the road. The 2 girls, as it turned out, had their phones mostly pointed at the ground as they walked. That meant they didn't see us until we were probably 10 or so feet away from them. 2 dudes walking in the dark towards them in the middle of nowhere, at a supposedly haunted location. They screamed bloody murder. We apologized and told them we're just going to check the place out too. Didn't even cross my mind how creepy that must have seemed to them until we had already scared the shit out of them. Whoopsie. My friends and I grew up in a town that had a large abandoned psychiatric hospital. People went in there all the time and we decided senior year of high school to sneak in at 2-ish am. We get in with flashlights and start just exploring. We get up to the 3rd floor and start hearing footsteps. We turn the flashlights off and hide in a room. We watch this big black figure shuffle by the door and down the hall. We ran the opposite way to another stairwell and got out. I'm sure it was just some homeless dude or something, but we were spooked for a while. This was back in summer 2012. Every morning my mom used to take me and my brother to our grandparents, while she went to work. My grandparents lived in a really isolated rural zone. Near my grandparents' house there was a huge abandoned factory, and I've always wanted to go to see what was in there. So I begged my uncle, he lived at my grandparents' house, to explore that building. He said yes, so we went to the building and searched for an opening to get inside. Once inside, we started to look around the place, and obviously found nothing except old machines and stuff like that. When we was about to leave, we heard noises coming from upstairs, and then steps. We saw a shadow coming towards us, so we got the feck out of there running. A few days later, I was at my grandparents' house with all my cousins. Suddenly, the neighbors rang our doorbell, and told us that there was someone breaking into our back garden. My uncle went out to check while one of my cousins called 112, local police number. Soon after the call, my uncle came back inside, and he told us that he saw that guy that had broke in, running towards the old abandoned building. I never discovered if the guy in the building and the other in the garden were the same person. Pretty messed up story. When my house was being built, I did what you're not supposed to do, and went into the construction zone to take some pictures in the frame that was being built. I did it a few times. One of the last times I kept hearing weird noises that seemed to be sort of following me, and I totally felt like there was someone else there with me. Anyways, turned out it was a raccoon that was in there. I don't know what he was doing, but when I saw him I got just as scared as if it had really been a ghost and ran for it. I had an interesting phone call to the builders trying to explain that. I think I saw a raccoon in the house. When I was on the road looking at the house from my car, and it looked at me out where the window is supposed to be. My friends and I explored an abandoned psych hospital in Suffolk County, Long Island. After checking out the building with the cafeteria and bowling alley, we decided to leave by exiting through the patient room window that we entered in. I realized I had left my flashlight back in an adjacent patient room, so I told my friends that I would quickly grab it. When I went to the other patient room to retrieve it, I noticed that the door was closed and a light flicker was occurring on the other side of it. I noped out of there so fast. Rural experience: a graveyard behind my high school in the middle of cornfields was a go-to driving around spot because we had nothing else to do as teenagers. Early on in the school year, a lady parked her car in the back of the cemetery and walked into the cornfield and shot herself in the head. The graveyard is super old and on a gravel side road, so no one noticed for like a week. Kids who were running cross-country smelled something rancid and reported it. Once it was investigated, the truth came out: it was weird. She wasn't even from my area. She drove around 2 hours here and had no relation to anything around the area. No note was left. It was really bizarre. Anyways, we were driving around months later telling the story to some younger students, really trying to freak them out. But when we turned the corner to pull in the graveyard, a random car was parked in the back of the yard. We slowly rolled up on it while all of us were losing our minds, only to see a topless woman sit up from the back seat followed by a topless man. Awkward. But that was the tightest my butt had been clenched up to that point of life. One summer when I was a kid, it somehow got popular to explore the storm drainage system underneath our neighborhood. Yes, like the ones in it, but just pouring concrete. These were the round tunnels made from pre-made pieces. Getting into the pipes required crawling through a tight fit for 15 to 20 feet, but after that you could stand. As you explored the system, you'd find areas that were big enough to drive a golf cart through, though it would have been impossible to get one there. Occasionally there would be odd structures, like grates that looked like prison bars that only covered half the pipe. Very rarely there would be light coming in from a grate in the road above, but most of the time we needed flashlights to see anything at all. Every single sound was nerve-wracking, because technically there shouldn't have been any sounds other than running water down there. Of course, we weren't the Goonies, so we didn't have a map or the sense to make one as we went along. Most of the local kids had gotten to know the system well enough to navigate though, and we figured out that if you got lost, you just always chose the turn that led to a bigger pipe, because the biggest one ran about a half-mile outside the neighborhood and emptied, in a 15-foot plunge, into a local pond and creek. Well, one day my brother, who was essentially fearless, and some friends decided to go a different direction from the main junction to explore a tunnel none of us had ever ventured to. I admit it, I was too scared. I don't know why on that day I was creeped out, but I was. So 2 friends and I stayed in the junction while my brother and his 2 friends went exploring. After they were gone for 10 or 15 minutes, we heard terrified shouting and running footsteps echoing down the tunnels, coming toward us. My friends ran. I wanted to run, but that was my brother down there. Finally, through the dark tunnel I heard one of my brother's friends shout, "Go!" We all ran the big tunnel, because instinctively we knew that whatever was down there would catch us if we had to shimmy back through the small pipes to get out the way we came in. So we ran hard, flashlight beams bouncing off the walls, until we finally started seeing light from where the tunnel emptied into the pond. One by one we all reached the drop and just kept running into thin air, falling into the pond below. I was terrified of heights and I didn't even know how to swim, but that didn't stop me. As I was making my way to land, my brother and his friends came shooting out of the pipe and into the pond. For a moment I thought they had been playing a prank on us, but no, my brother immediately insisted that we all go home. He wouldn't even tell me what happened on the entire, dripping wet, almost a mile walk. The whole group went to my house and my brother, knowing we would all get in trouble, told my mother where we were and what we had been doing. He also told her that when he and his friends reached the next junction in the tunnel they were exploring, they came across a spot where light was trickling in from above. There was a pile of trash and debris built up around one of those half-pipe prison bar grates, and laying within that pile of trash, they saw a man, who upon hearing them, raised his head, reached out towards them, and started crawling out of the trash in their direction. So they ran. My mother called the police. They asked my brother to guide them to the location in the pipes where this happened. They found exactly what he described, but the man was gone. Within minutes there were at least a dozen police cars around our neighborhood with people and dogs searching the drainage system. They wouldn't tell us any details, but we do know that they never found the man. The dogs followed his scent to the end of the pipe at the pond, but they never picked up the scent anywhere on the ground around the pond or creek. As far as I know, none of us ever went into the storm drains again. I decided to climb a tree with a friend in the middle of a large college campus at 2 a.m. Sat up there chatting a while. Then a car pulled up and parked nearly right below us. We go silent. One guy gets out. Driver stays put with the engine running. 5 minutes pass, a whistle comes from behind a nearby building. And one is returned from the guy below us. A few minutes later someone walks up. There's a short exchange, we can hear and see everything. The guy walks away and the car leaves. We are silent. 10 minutes pass. We hand gestured and decided it's go time. We dropped out of the tree and ran. Technically those guys should have felt not alone, but instead we did for weeks. We were so sure we had been spotted. Not really urban. Recently was on a Central American beach at 2 a.m. looking for turtles just to observe as it is nesting season. Doing it right, walking along with red light on and all. Anyways, didn't see any. We had known turtle poaching and drug smuggling on these beaches was common, but until someone pulled up with their lights off blocking the road out, I didn't even think about how I'd handle myself. In the end, if you don't bother them or try and photograph, they don't have to be aggressive to you. But still feels awful to walk by them knowing we're so drastically opposed and so far away from law enforcement or hospitals. I lived quite literally in the middle of nowhere. I worked a night job as well. I was leaving the house one night and heard gunshots, as if dozens of firearms discharged at the same time. I hit the deck and laid flat on my stomach and was freaking out. Several seconds later, I heard it again. I had my keys in my hand and got my door unlocked and crawled back inside the house. I was terrified and had no idea what was happening. I went from window to window literally expecting to see people coming from the woods. There was no one. I didn't go to work or sleep that night because I couldn't figure out WTH. I called my dad the next morning and he was beside himself. He said, "You know there was a fort there during the Civil War, right? Shots fired from the past." I've only been brave enough to do the urban exploration once. Well, twice I guess, but the same location both times. Near an apartment I used to live in, there was an old hotel that was abandoned and boarded up. One night, a friend was over and hanging out with me. We had a few drinks and, in a moment of inebriated bravado, a little tipsy, but not fall down drunk at all, we decided that exploring the old hotel would be a brilliant idea. We made our way over and explored a couple of the rooms. The doors were on the outside, so it may have been a motel rather than a hotel, I'm not sure the difference. The rooms were moldy, dirty, broken down, but didn't have anything unexpected. There was some graffiti on the walls and some used condoms on the ground, in the rooms. Then, we went into the office/lobby area. As soon as we walked in, we froze. There, in the distance, in the darkened lobby, was a man staring at us. He didn't move, just stood there and stared us down. We bolted, quickly, and ran at a full sprint back to my apartment. Thankfully, The man, homeless, drug addict, we didn't know, didn't follow us. A few days later, my friend was back over during the day. We were talking about the experience with the hotel and, this time spurred on by daylight, decided to look in the hotel lobby again. When we entered, the man was still there. Standing in the same spot, staring us down, and made of cardboard. We had gotten freaked out by a cardboard cutout hawking the hotel's website and online bookings. Finally one where I can share the maddest thing that has happened to me. This is roughly 8 to 9 years ago. Me and my friends had just started passing our driving tests. We were 17 to 18, so we'd go for drives in the late evenings to explore scary or haunted local places. This particular evening wasn't really overly interesting, but we were on our way to a pretty nice pub/restaurant that's located a bit out of the way of everything else, and we pulled over into a viewpoint as one of the guys needed a bathroom break. There were no bathrooms. From the small car park there was a path to a gated house, another path that led down to a beach, and also an opening with an old damaged gate that had enough space on its sides to just walk around it. Behind the gate was seemingly just a bunch of trees/bushes/forest. The guy went in the direction and came back weirdly excited, saying there's a creepy/abandoned looking caravan just sat in the middle of the foresty area, with a load of camping chairs set up outside it. Just for the record, we were never troublemakers. We like to have a laugh, but we had absolutely zero bad intentions here. If you stepped just past the gate you could see the back of the caravan and some of the chairs. It did look in disrepair and the window was smashed. No signs of life though. Somehow as a group we decided we'd go to the pub place for a bit of food, then come back again and have a proper look at this caravan. When we came back it was now 11 p.m. So pitch dark and there were no lights there at all. Clear sky though, so the moon gave us some visibility. We decided to slowly sneak up to the caravan, maybe have a look what's inside and just go from there. Even though at this stage there were still no signs of life or danger, 2 guys were too scared and stayed behind the gate, while 4 of us started making the 30 to 40 meter walk to the caravan. Thinking back to it, the silence was way too eerie even though this was the middle of nowhere, and I still very clearly remember how quickly it went downhill. As we got close to the caravan, I suddenly noticed an old-looking pushbike propped up against the side of it that we couldn't see before. Alarm bells instantly went off and I started to whisper, I was second, to the lead guy to let him know, which is when someone suddenly jumped out from a bush just past the caravan. This is without a doubt the second scariest moment of my life so far. The first happened moments later. We all started screaming and sprinting back to our cars. I subconsciously realized I had just been overtaken by the lead guy, yet as I reached the gate I heard very quick heavy footsteps behind me. This is scary moment number 1 of all time for me. We had our 2 cars parked up just in front of the gate, but facing it. Absolutely idiotic setup for a quick getaway. I managed to somehow grab my keys and jump into mine amidst absolute chaos. Everyone seemed to be running about screaming and my heart was pounding. So I jump into my car and switch the engine on, which turns on the lights which now illuminate the guy who was chasing us, and he's waving around a long metal-tipped harpoon. I remember a vague feeling of safety inside my car, but me turning the engine on got his attention onto me. I think he may have thought I'd panic and drive forward over him, and he hit the bonnet of my car with his harpoon. However, he used the blunt end, so I'm thankful for that. 2 others hopped into my car, but the other driver couldn't get his keys out, so him and the rest ran out of the car park onto a completely dark 60-mile-per-hour road that went steeply downhill. Everyone ran downhill apart from what I guess is the genius of the group who went uphill on his own. I somehow had enough nerves to reverse back whilst being careful not to hit anyone, then drive out the car park. Guy was stood there waving his harpoon still and shouting. I couldn't make out what he was saying amidst the chaos, but thankfully didn't chase me. We managed to rendezvous some distance down the road. The guys who ran downhill covered really impressive distance in a short amount of time, all apart from uphill guy who we couldn't see and couldn't get through to on the phone, so that was concerning. Someone suggested calling the police. I thought, sure, let's tell them 6 of us sneaked up to someone in some woods in the middle of the night and he chased us away. That'll make us sound great. Next step was to retrieve the other car as the guy finally got his keys out. To be honest, we had expected Harpoon Dude to have smashed it up a bit, but he never even touched it. However, he was still stood there, now just behind the gate. Driver 2 started trying to reason with him, but the guy started yelling something about throwing rocks at his caravan and smashing the window. We didn't of course do any of that, but clearly this was a down on his luck guy who had been bullied by others before we came along. He eventually retreated and I had to drive right up to the other car for the driver to retrieve it, and that was pretty much it, except I couldn't sleep that night and was mortified. With the benefit of hindsight, what we did was of course dumb. We didn't know the guy was there, but we shouldn't have bothered him at all, especially that late at night. I knew no details about him until around a year ago when an article popped up on the local news saying the police kicked him out of there as he was staying there illegally. Honestly, I just felt bad for the guy, and I don't think he's a bad dude at all. He could have caused us some serious damage to our cars, and that's not even mentioning the fact he could have clearly got me in the back with that harpoon. 10 tenths for the bush disguise though. He could have stopped there after jumping out and we would never have come back. Edit. One funny detail I forgot to mention is the two dudes who stayed by the gate initially thought we were running back screaming as a joke to scare them, so they just stood there laughing at first. It's only when one of them realized there was one person too many they realized it was no joke. Lol. I was exploring an abandoned theater, since demolished, at a state school. I rarely have experiences, and mostly urbex by myself. But this particular time there were loud screeches / metal sounds and bangs that I can't attest that building ever made before or after the many times I've explored it. I knew, without a doubt, that someone was there and wanted to make themselves known. Very strange. It was the only experience I've ever had in that particular building, although others have said they experienced other things. Same complex, except the actual hospital / asylum with the padded walls and such. Only building I ever hated going into. And I only did so twice and mostly with other people. The moment you walked in you felt you weren't alone, the air felt very strange, and I always walked back out with a terrible headache that always went away as soon as you left the building and went into a different one. Ironically, it was the newest building on the campus. It's since been torn down and I don't miss it a bit. A psychic friend refused to walk near it since he got a strange vibe from it also, completely separate and without knowing my own experience with the building. When development finally started happening, the poor demo crew lost a lot of members that freaked out after hearing screaming / being touched while cleaning the buildings out / prepping for demo. I never experienced anything that major as I tend to go in with an open mind, but it doesn't surprise me. On the flip side, I gave a bunch of amateur urbexers a scare too. My boyfriend and I were in a mostly empty newer building on the same complex, and we heard a bunch of teenagers being stupid / yelling / etc. You know how young ones are. Anyway, we were in the code / locker room of the building and I was talking to him. You couldn't see him though, and I was backlit because the window was behind me. They came loudly through the door and I just sort of silently looked at them, didn't blink and didn't move and didn't say anything. They kinda had this freaked out look on their face, then backed up and left the building. I still giggle at that one. There was a decommissioned naval base in the town I grew up in. We used to sneak into the old barracks, and one time I turned the corner into the hallway and found a lit cigarette on the ground. There was nobody around from what I could see or hear. We noped out pretty shortly after that. One night my friend and I were walking back to his place after a concert. It was pretty late and we decided to take a shortcut through a construction site because we were tired. Since all the streets around the construction site were closed, it was completely empty, as if the whole area was abandoned like in a zombie apocalypse, with just the two of us in the South Loop area of Chicago. We're crossing this small bridge and just chatting away about what we liked the most about the show. I was looking at him and then turned my head forward and was face to face with what looks like a zombie rat. Someone had taken a mummified rat or squirrel or something and used wire to position it like it was pouncing Madeira at your face. Scared out of me, here is a picture I snapped of it with my shitty phone. The combination of the abandoned construction site and the zombie rat creeped both of us out, so we said, fuck this, and ran until we hit a busy street with other people around. So I've actually got a great one, but it's a long story. It started when my parents' cat went missing in a remote little part of Scotland. My younger brother and I go looking for the cat all around the local area. There's this old abandoned hotel up the road and we figured it might be a good cat hideout, so we go check it out. The place is way larger than we realized and has its own highly creepy vibe. There's still shoes and clothes and you can see where people just left their tea or possessions. Looks like people left in a huge hurry and never came back. No signs of fire or anything. Remains a mystery why people left almost all their possessions behind. Anyway, it's been vacant for like a decade. We searched all 4 floors, more out of curiosity by this point. The final place we had to search was the lobby. We go down and I'm busy staring at this perfect ream of white paper. It's the old kind with peel-off holes down the sides. But it's perfectly pristine. No dust, no water damage, despite wind howling through the building. While I'm wondering why the hell this isn't damaged, I see movement out of the corner of my eye. I should add that this place is an absolute mess. The floor is rotten wood and there's broken glass and junk all over. Anyway, as I look up, there's a woman standing by the reception desk. Standing totally normally as if she works for this long-forgotten hotel, and she says, "Hi there. How can I help you?" Adding to the WTF factor, I swear I've never shit myself as hard as I did that day. She somehow made no sound walking up to us in a place where you simply cannot move silently. Her demeanor was bizarre and I swear I thought there was no way she is real. Mind flipped between thinking she's a ghost or I'm imagining things. Nope. She's real. My brother, shitting his pants a little bit less than me, decides to engage with her. I'm looking around to see if she's got any weapons, going into WTF, is she a druggy type of thinking. We explain why we are there. She tells us she looks after the cats. Okay, love you, do you? Then she asks us to come fix a pipe on the 3rd floor. I'm thinking hell no, but my bro decides for some reason to say yes. By now I'm just having a crisis of wondering what the flying fuck is going on, because she's acting like this is a normal thing to ask people in an abandoned building in the most remote parts of the UK imaginable. A woman on her own, with 2 adult men in an abandoned hotel where not a soul would hear her. But here she is basically putting herself in the most compromised position imaginable, as though it's any other Tuesday. She's going to kill us. Anyways, not wanting my brother to be shanked by some hippie drugged up cat hoarder, I decide to follow at a distance and hit a shard of glass I picked up. We climb these rotten stairways like we are on our way up a marble staircase in the Ritz, because this is a normal thing to be doing with a stranger. We determine the pipe can't be fixed and come back down. She sort of excuses herself and leaves. Brother afterwards also said he was convinced she was a ghost or some shit at first. Why he engaged with her is beyond me to this day. I thought he'd lost it. The best part of the story. Several weeks later she meets my father. Proceeds to break her car battery every few weeks and ask for his help. Tries to get him drunk and keeps inviting him into her house. She seemingly fell in love with him because he helps feed local cats. My dad is a happily married man and this led to a shitstorm in the local village. Added an update on Kitty. Sadly we never found the kitty. He was a stray, so we see it as he came to visit for a little while and then went on with his kitty ways. That's the happier outlook and we stick to it. Since then, they've adopted another 3 cats. 2 are kittens and 1 is a big old meanie turned soft. They're great. One day, me and 3 of my friends decided to explore a local ruined mansion/tower that was once owned by a rather eccentric millionaire. When I say tower, I mean 14-story penthouse in the middle of the woods, with an elevator shaft up to it from the 2-story mansion below. The driveway itself is the only way onto property, without using a boat, as there is a moat around the entire house making it impossible to enter from any other way. We were all very bored, and I was about 18 to 19 at the time. So me and my friends decided to go and explore this mansion. We have heard stories about it but none of us had ever actually been. The tower was very visible from a local highway so we knew exactly where it was, so we decided to hike in. We decided to go around dusk, between 7 to 8 p.m. So lighting started to decrease by the time we walked the mile up the driveway to the mansion. After some time exploring and honestly not seeing much that was interesting, my friend decided to tell us a story of a party that happened here 10+ years ago, where a drunk teenager fell down the elevator shaft and died. I had service, and my phone, so obviously I needed to consult Google to see how accurate that story was. Turns out it was very real, which kinda freaked all of us out a bit, as now it was very dark outside and we were in a ruined mansion. There were even a few articles claiming the tower was now haunted. After getting bored of exploring the basement/first floor, we decided to climb our way to the 2nd floor. We got to a lounge-type room when we had our first scare. Looked out from a window and we saw a flock of birds take flight from the woods, like there was something out there. Normally I wouldn't be scared, it's just birds, I told myself. We keep exploring. At this point I was on edge myself, but I am not weak. I figured I'd keep exploring until my friends were ready to leave. We found a kitchen on the 2nd floor, and that's when things started to go south. The kitchen was deep into the house, with no windows to the outdoors. We heard a door open on the floor below us and heard the sounds of footsteps. We all stopped dead in our tracks and got as quiet as we all humanly could. listening for anything. We could still hear these footsteps downstairs and it totally freaked all of us out. We, quietly, decided we needed to sneak out of the mansion as fast as we could. We snuck to one of the second-story windows that had been broken from vandals, and were able to squeeze out and onto the first-story roof above the garage. Jumped down from there and bolted as fast as we can. I remember turning around as we ran and seeing the silhouette of a figure standing at the front of the house. No doubt we heard when we were upstairs. We kept running to the end of the driveway, where much to our dismay, 2 cop cars were waiting for us. Apparently we had not been watched by some terrifying ghost or criminal or anything. Sadly it was just the cops. Apparently they had laser trip wires installed to keep explorers away from the house. I have no clue why. Maybe for legal reasons? Anyways, at the end of the day I got a $250 fine for trespassing and a very strict talking to by the cops to never return to the house. Super creepy experience while it was happening, that ended up having a pretty normal explanation. It still seems like there is something about that tower that is odd to me, but alas, I will never know why they really care so much about people exploring. All in all, I'm glad it ended as it did. Cops are a lot easier to talk to than ghosts/criminals/whatever else could have made walking sounds below us. Always a funny story to this day, lol. When I was in high school, my girlfriend lived in Topanga Canyon, which is a pretty bizarre place filled with bizarre people. Well, one night I was leaving her house and I had to walk down the road to get to my car. Road in quotes because most of Topanga's houses are accessed by barely single-lane cracked tar roads with stumps and stuff coming up through them. It's like a 10-minute walk down the hill and I get to my car and get in. It's pitch black. I sit there for a moment and before I turn my car on, I hear a noise. Thinking it was an animal, I didn't move. How am I supposed to know if a bear or a mountain lion can break into a 1990 Volvo 240DL? I hear the noise past the car, but I don't see anything. Literally nothing. I freeze. After about 5 minutes, I decided that if it was something dangerous it would have stopped, so I turn on the car. I switch on my headlights and drive the rest of the way down the hill. That's when I saw them. As I turned onto a wider road, I see 2 people with black cloths draped over their entire bodies, no shoes, walking slowly down the road in the direction I'm driving. The cloths must have been velvet or similar, because they were pitch black even as my headlights passed across. I gunned in around them and turned onto the main road, and watched in my rearview mirror as my taillights' red color faded on their forms. I then realized that if I had left my girlfriend's house about 30 seconds later I would have literally walked into 2 people, wearing jet black, walking slowly in total darkness in the middle of the night in Topanga. Just got a shiver thinking about that. Oh, another good one. I was exploring an abandoned rehab near my house with 2 of my friends and it had just freshly snowed, literally while we were exploring. I was approaching one building there when I looked down and saw a very large set of obviously men's footprints in the snow, heading into the building. We continued anyway. We always went prepared to defend ourselves because you really never know, and we opened the door to a completely silent, empty building. There was a staircase to a tiny loft and we went up, only to find that someone had cut a makeshift door in the wall and was presumably hanging out in the attic. We opened that door too, and there was still no one. We never saw anyone, but I haven't been back since. It creeped me out far too much. My father does architectural salvage for a living, and I help him out from time to time. When he was touring Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts, he was following 2 other salvagers and the foreman through the attics. Upon turning a corner, they all paused and stared. There, sitting in the middle of a shaft of light from a shattered skylight, in an otherwise empty attic, were 2 children's Easter baskets. So it's 7 p.m. in winter, so it's pitch black as it usually is around that time. Me and a group of friends are really bored and we are looking for something to do. We eventually come across this large building. It looks abandoned and quite old. We end up walking around it to find a way in, but to no avail. All the doors and windows were either boarded up or locked. One of us come up with a brilliant idea of going onto the roof and using the crate thingies as a ladder, then climbing in through a window. We do all of this successfully, with only one mishap of me sitting on broken glass. We get in and it doesn't look like anyone has been there for a while. We get in and it feels so much bigger inside. We eventually get lost. We are using our phones as torches and one of my friends start running without even saying a thing. We run with him because his frantic running kind of frightened me. We go through many doors until we get to the room we were in originally, and as we are climbing to the window a door opens and there is a guy, It was pitch black so I could only see his silhouette, but the way he swayed as he looked at me was UV. I didn't like it one bit, so when we got to the main road we talked about it and my friend saw him too. He said he saw that guy's head peering around the corner when he shone his light on him. I still kind of wonder if the guy was following us and watching us when we were exploring the building. None of them want to go back. I kind of do if I am being honest. It's been a couple years now. I may not be a urban explorer, but I do have a story I want to share. When I was a kid, I was at my friend's house and we were playing video games. I was probably around 10 that time. But yeah, we were hanging out and I realized it was dark and late, maybe close to 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. So I decided to bike home cause my house wasn't too far from his, maybe 3 to 4 blocks, but as I went home, there was this long curve going downhill and my house would be there at the corner and there would be woods on the other side of the road. As I was cruising down the hill I heard something from the side, like something in the bushes, and could hear the trees moving. There's street lights too so it wasn't too dark, but all of a sudden there were so many deers that came out of the woods, like that Jurassic Park movie where all the dinosaurs started running away. As I was cruising downhill I felt like everything was in slow motion. I suddenly stopped and was scared, hoping the deers don't run me over. But none of them did. I was shocked at how many deer there was and at the same time amazed how I wasn't hurt. But I came to my sense and thought, why did that happen, as if they were getting chased by something big. Then again I heard something from the woods, look over and saw nothing but the leaves on the trees cause it was still dark with the street lights. I was close to home at that time and just went home and told nobody cause it felt like I couldn't. But till this day I still don't know why I experienced that moment and how I was lucky not to get run over by a pack of running deers, but I know I definitely wasn't alone when I was starting at the woods. Took place in my aunt's very old house around 1980. My parents wanted to visit with her and I came along because there was nothing else to do. She told me there was a computer, DR180 type of thing, early days in computers, hooked up to the TV in my cousin's former bedroom. So up I went, looking forward to telling the computer to print I was here across the screen 100 times. Suddenly I felt like I was being stared at. Such a strange feeling. I looked behind me and didn't see anything. But I certainly didn't feel welcome. I remembered all the times I'd played with my cousin in that room when we were younger, and she always made me go in the closet to get a board game out. It always felt weird in that room. Anyhow, I calmly turned off the computer and went downstairs, didn't want to give it the pleasure of knowing it scared me away. 2 years later we're out with this aunt at a family gathering and I mentioned that experience to her. She just laughed and said, "Oh, I thought you knew about him. He was here when we moved in. I see him upstairs all time but he hangs out in that room." My daughter hated sleeping there, and so did her kids when they came to visit. I was exploring with some of my friends one day in a real sketchy part of a real sketchy city. Smart, I know, and we came across what was clearly a recently used sleeping bag. Looking beyond the sleeping bag, we saw a leather belt fashioned into some sort of noose hanging from the ceiling. I've never dipped so fast from somewhere in my life. On our way out we came across a dead cat with a get well balloon tied around it. Worst experience with urban exploring ever. Have posted this elsewhere but it fits the topic pretty well. Back in my teenage hoodlum days some friends and I did some urban exploration in an abandoned medical facility. It was perched atop a steep hill with only one road in and out, surrounded by a small forest. From what we had heard, this place did some serious procedures, heart surgery and the like. But now it was totally left to rot, or so we thought. We imagined our expedition would be a creepy midnight jaunt through a haunted hospital that we could brag about to our lamer friends. So I drive up this hill and park behind the facility. The first thing we notice is that there are some ambient lights on. The place is not totally off the grid like we were led to believe. No problem, they're probably there just to scare off troublemakers like us. The rest of the facade is dark, there are no cars in the lot. Then, as we're scoping out the exterior, we notice that there's a board over one of the windows. Sure enough, we peel it back and the window is broken, a way in. We waste no time in vaulting up and over, avoiding the edges of the broken glass. Suddenly we're inside and it's clear this place is certainly not abandoned. There are interior lights that come on as we wander around, there's some equipment scattered about. I start to get an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. My friends are enjoying themselves and I don't want to be the one who got scared. Yet I can't ignore the sense of pure dread that is getting stronger every second I'm in this place. Finally I tell them that we need to GTFO, and don't bother explaining why. I drove, so they have no choice but to follow me. We scramble back out the window we came in, climb in the car and peel off, turning off the only road that leads up the hill and stopping at a nearby gas station. A few of my friends went inside to get drinks, but a few of us stayed in the car. From the spot where we parked you can see up the hill to the outside of the facility. And we watched as a security car with flashing orange lights pulled up to the front, followed shortly by a cop car. We must have missed them by 2 minutes. Once my friends come back we point out the welcome wagon sitting outside the facility, and after a bout of nervous laughter we head back home and marvel at how lucky we are. If I hadn't listened to my gut, my hoodlum friends and I probably would have spent some time in juvie for breaking and entering. Not an exploration. I live in a dorm and was hungry at 2 a.m. and decided to cook something in the kitchen. The kitchen had this very large window without curtains so you can see if someone is outside. I saw an old man just standing there next to a trash bin outside, so I smiled at him. I forgot some ingredients, so I grabbed them in the fridge, which is on the other side of the kitchen. When I came back, the old man is not there anymore. I was terrified because I didn't hear any footsteps. I turned off the stove and went back to my room immediately. Why would he stood still silently in front of the kitchen in the first place? Hell man, I don't even want to cook at night anymore now. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.